So stupid. Thank you for taking away functionality that we had.
Yeah, you gotta walk back the functionality. That's the trick.
Exactly.
Let me make sure my tab is muted so I don't get audio feedback. Yes, it is. Make sure that I can see the thing. Kingdom of Zero. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't share it out to the group. Let me do that too.
I'm still learning.
I think we could all learn a lot from John. So
we all.
That is why we are having him teach this class.
Let's see here. I'm just gonna do the thing. Kingdom of Monstera, we'll share there. And I think that's good. Yeah, we'll just wait a few minutes in case anyone else wants to actually join as a participant. And if not, that's fine too. I got 10 people watching on Facebook.
Nice.
Hi, Facebook. Oh, hi, Facebook. Yeah. Yeah, I've got just a general overview of the stuff that I do as the Kingdom Webminister and kind of like what I've learned about the job and stuff like that.
Sweet.
So yeah, good times, good times. Yeah. And for those of you on Facebook, even though you're not going to be able to participate directly, if you have specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. This I assume will move a little slower than our courts do. So you can ask me questions if you'd like, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. For those of you on Facebook, we're waiting just a couple minutes to let anyone file in who wants, and then I will start talking.
Sorry for the thumb. I have to plug in my battery on the little dragon. Is getting grumpy. Little beggar's hungry.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right. I think I'm going to get started. We're a few minutes after 7. All righty. And whoever's talking will appear on the screen in the corner. So. For everyone that's watching or who's participating that doesn't know me, my name is Laird John Buchanan. I use they, them pronouns. I am the current Kingdom Webminister. I have been Webminister for just over a year now, which is mind-boggling to me. It does not feel like it's been that long. I've been in the SCA for about 5 years now. And I have a background in various types of information technology. I work as a database and software developer mundanely, and I do a little bit of random like coding and web stuff just for fun. So I've been doing this kind of tech thing for a while. I am new to the whole Webminister thing, but I've been learning as I go. So what I'm going to go over today is kind of the basic what I do as the Webminister, specifically the Kingdom Webminister, and then try to give you an overview of the job, what I've learned about it, and then I'll let anyone ask questions that wants to know more about it. So hold on 1 second, let me minimize this. So as I see it, kind of the core duties as a Webminister, as represented by unrelated stock graphics that PowerPoint inserted, are maintaining the Kingdom website and associated technology, evaluating development opportunities for future growth, and then managing deputies and local Webministers. And then there's sort of like an other category, which we'll get to at the end. That's just the catch-all for all the other random stuff. So maintaining the Kingdom website and associated technology. So this is kind of like the key, like core thing that most people probably think of when they think of the Webminister. Keeping the website running, basically keeping the website up to date, making sure that the information on the Kingdom website is maintained, changing people's names when they come in, doing the prince and princess, king and queen, crown, all that stuff, keeping those sites up to date. Changing anything if someone notices a misspelling or typo or whatever. Actually, not a huge part of the job, to be honest, keeping the website up to date. Those are usually minor changes. They don't usually take up a lot of my time. Troubleshooting issues that arise on the fly. This is it varies. It can be very minor, or it can be a big, like, things are falling apart. We had the website just kind of go down completely last year, I believe it was, at some point. Something was wrong with like the site's like theme in WordPress, and it needed to be fixed, and the whole site was unavailable while that was happening. So sometimes stuff like that will happen. Or something on the Wikipedia MediaWiki distribution will break and you have to fix it. That stuff can be really basic and simple, or it can be really involved and technical, and there's no real way to know. We do use a number of technology platforms that do offer support. So if it's something wrong with like the domain that's not our fault, then get in contact with the appropriate support people and then get them to hopefully fix it. Which kind of leads into the next point, which is maintaining the various platforms we use. So we use a number of third-party platforms. We've been trying to transition away from using just like HTML sites with, that we update through FTP. We use WordPress as our primary content management system. So that's where the website is hosted. Well, it's not where it's hosted. That's where the website uses for its like themes and backend code and all that stuff. The website is actually hosted on DreamHost, and we use SiteGround to manage a lot of the domain stuff. So we have SiteGround and DreamHost as well, which are our like domain management system, and then our content, or our host. And then we use MySQL for all of our like backend databases. So things like our Marshallet database and the databases that feed the WordPress stuff and all that. So sometimes you have to dig around in those if something is broken or someone needs something changed that's not easy to change in other ways. A lot of times that's things like adding zip codes to our zip code list, or like figuring out why someone can't log into the Marshallet database, like if there's something broken in there. Another thing that I've had to maintain, which I don't think would be considered necessarily part of the general duties of the Webminister, but I ended up having to do it, which was keeping our Kingdom MediaWiki install updated. When I came on board, we had a fairly out-of-date version, and they made a lot of changes. And oh boy, installing that was a fun time. I think I spent 6 hours getting that up, and hopefully my successor will not have to do that. But that is another, like, even though the Webminister is not really primarily responsible for the Wikipedia page, that's the historian's office that maintains that, but the Webminister is responsible for the technology that underlies it. So that means making sure MediaWiki isn't broken. So in addition to updating the install, I've also had to troubleshoot a couple of issues, primarily in uploading images. For some reason, it likes to break that occasionally. And you've got to figure out why. You do have full access to all of the backend FTP stuff, so you can go in and look around at the structure and see why it's not working. You have access to get into like the consoles and terminals and all that stuff. I try to avoid it whenever possible because it's all a big nightmare mess, like everything on the internet, but it's something that is part of the duties of the office. Maintaining user security primarily for WordPress and FTP. So this is establishing a security policy and then adhering to it as far as making sure that the right people have access to what they need and nobody has too much access. It's pretty straightforward. It mainly comes in when we're transitioning officers. So if you have a new Webminister come in or an old one leave, to make sure that the old officer doesn't still have access to the site. and make sure that the new officer does. Responding to user inquiries about the Kingdom website. So that's anyone that emails or messages me and says, hey, what about this thing? Usually it's, how do I do this? Sometimes it's, I have this idea and I'd like to implement it. Sometimes it's, this thing is broken. It's really, this is another one of those things that you never can really tell in advance. It's just something to be aware of. I try to check the Kingdom Webminister email at least a couple times a day and respond to the mail at least once every day or two. So keeping on top of that correspondence, making sure that people know you're at least like alive and looking at things. And the last thing that's related to this is very important, and that's telling people to email serveradmin@onstaora.org to reset their email passwords. So the Webminister actually doesn't have access to like the Google account. We've started to set up ER access. That's the server admin. We have a server admin who manages some other, the server admin manages like our core server hardware and like our Google, Google account. We have been establishing ER access for individual domains as they come up. So there are a few domains that do allow me to change their emails or reset their passwords. But if it's not one that we've done before, the server admin is the one to do that. And by far the most common emails I get are, hey, can you reset my email password? So telling people to email the right person, or generally speaking, telling people to contact the right person if they contact you about something that is not necessarily in your domain, since people tend to think of the Webminister as the technology and internet person, but there are questions that might be for the seneschal or for the social media deputy that are more appropriate for them to handle. So like a lot of times with like policy or procedure questions, that's not really something that I am responsible for or should be responsible for. And I try to direct them to the appropriate party. The Webminister does do some social media managing, but it is not our primary function. It's very, very much a secondary job. So the second core thing is evaluating development opportunities for future growth. So this is like all the things that we could be doing. And these are like, these bullet points aren't really like, I don't have a big long speech for each of these, but generally speaking, like this is looking for ways we could do things better, listening to people's comments about things we're not doing well, or just trying to do the same things that we're doing, but doing them more efficiently. So things like moving to WordPress instead of using all these HTML pages, which makes managing all of the website easier. And it also makes it easier for people that are less technically proficient to act as local web ministers. Things like updating the Marshallet page, which when I came on was really like, it was very outdated. It looked like it was like a 90s or 2000s website. And because all of this stuff takes time and we're all volunteers, it just had never been touched. So one of my first major projects was to update the Marshallet page. We're migrating reports over to the Formcraft forms instead of using these HTML forms, because the Formcraft forms give us more options as far as configuring them. Another one that has come up this year is to respond to unusual circumstances. So if something weird happens, like say a pandemic sweeps the world and everyone has to stay inside for a year, you're responsible for responding to that as needed. So we've experienced a lot of things technology related that I wasn't expecting when I took the job, and no one was expecting. And you've got to roll with it. So one of the things that we did very early on in the pandemic quarantine was to look at options for teleconferencing so we could do virtual events. So I evaluated a few different teleconferencing platforms. We settled on Zoom. I did some due diligence on that. We had some concerns about security and vulnerabilities, and did some research into that stuff. So this is a job where you have to have a lot of flexibility. Like you have to be willing to kind of roll with things and sometimes take the lead as far as the technology stuff goes, and also educate yourself in technology you might not be super familiar with. So like I've done a lot of remote work, but I haven't used a lot of teleconferencing platforms. Like I've used GoToMeeting mostly that's what my job uses. And frankly, I don't like it very much. And it's also not really appropriate for what we do. So, you have to be willing to look at other possibilities and then do enough research to be able to speak with some degree of knowledge on them. So you're really like any tech job, you're constantly learning. And then as far as like kind of things to keep in mind in this category, I like to try to keep an idea of what projects there are that I have available and like which ones are kind of longer term and which ones are really like immediate short-term stuff. So like things like, oh, this is a really annoying thing that we should fix and it's really simple short-term versus like this whole website needs to be redesigned and we should do that eventually. And also projects that might span more time. So one of the projects I've been working on as far as like long-term goals is, sorry, just checking the chat to see if there's any questions, is taking all of the Kingdom websites that are all like, they're all branded very differently because they were all developed at different times by different people and bringing them into one sort of unified look. So that one of the issues with the Kingdom website is as soon as you clicked away from the top level page, it was like you were transported to a different website. So I've been gradually moving sites over. And this is a very long-term project because there's a lot of these little sites. But we've tried to hit the major ones, the Seneschal site, the Exchequer, the Marshallet page, the Pelican page. There's a bunch of them that have been migrated. There's also the issue of you don't have to do everything as the web minister. Like you can reach out to other people that know more than you about other things. Like I'm not a Perl or a PHP developer. I don't know that much about it specifically. However, Don Martin does. Don Martin is the one who wrote the Marshallet database. He is the one who is responsible for maintaining the back end of that, not the database part. He does do that too, but he's responsible for the code because he's familiar with it, and it's more efficient to have him continue to be the person responsible for that than for me to learn all of that and kick him out for no reason. So like if you have someone that's willing to do the work and can continue to do that, that's great. Like, again, we're an all volunteer organization. Looking for people that can fill in the gaps is a good thing. It's better than not getting anything done. And then the last 2 points I have are, one is to consider the needs of the local groups. So the Kingdom is that's the big, top level, everyone sees that, but also the local groups are what a lot of people are interacting with day to day. Like, I don't think a lot of us go to the Kingdom site and like crawl through it extensively every day. We probably go to the events page, and that's like our main goal there because we're all familiar with the SCA. The Kingdom page is for new people, that's going to be their kind of first stop. But for a lot of us, the local group is going to be the page we interact with more. So if a local group is having trouble with something, that's definitely something to consider as far as priorities. Like if they want to migrate to WordPress, but they don't know how to do it. I built a very basic template for WordPress sites fairly early on that I can give to local web ministers and basically say, hey, here's a basic like template for an SCA group, and you can kind of customize it a little bit. Trying to give them resources because a lot of the local web ministers are going to be, they're not necessarily going to be able to commit a lot of time to this stuff. Everyone's busy, everyone's got a lot of things to do. The local groups don't necessarily have a giant pool of available candidates to draw from. And sometimes they have people filling a lot of different roles in the local group, especially with smaller groups. So I try to make myself available as a resource to the local groups. Even to the point of like, if a group needs help keeping their website up to date, to be willing to step in and say, hey, if you just need someone to change names on your page, like I can do that. I'd rather do that than have it not get done. And looking at, like keeping that information up to date is kind of the main thing that's like the number one priority for SCA pages, is making sure that all the information is up to date and correct. when I did a survey on the website a few months ago, and that was like one of the number one things was just having like officer names up to date, or champions for local groups, or events, making sure all that stuff is good. So yeah, your local groups are important, and like making sure that they have the resources they need is a big part of the job. And then the last point I have here is to think about long-term sustainability. So like anything we do needs to be able to keep going, and that includes passing it to somebody who isn't you. So in a year or so, someone else will have this job, and I don't know who it's going to be. And they might not be like super familiar with everything that I've been doing, but they should be able to pick it up and kind of keep it going. You know, again, not without help, but
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I hold on here. Participants. Yeah. Okay, we're good. Yeah, no, you're good. So yeah, like anytime you're trying to think of something you want to do, I try to think about like, is this something I'm going to be able to keep going, or is it going to be something where it requires a lot of maintenance, it requires a lot of like specific stuff. And if it's something that's going to be difficult to keep going when someone else is taking the job, then it's probably not worth doing. Or if it's something that's going to require like a huge investment in time to maintain, because again, volunteer organization, if it's something that requires, you know, you spend 20 hours a week to keep it running, then that's not sustainable for this position. And here we go. In the last category, managing deputies and local web ministers, which actually in a lot of ways is probably one of the biggest parts of this job. So this is the AKA herding cats part of the job. Remember that these are volunteers. Everyone that's doing this is doing other stuff in the SCA, you know, let alone their real lives. Like you don't have paid staff, you don't have full-time staff. We're all doing this because we love the SCA and we want to help. But that also means that we're doing something in addition to everything else we do. So, you know, it's important to consider that as far as like what you're asking of your employees, whatever, the people that you're managing, because the Webminister's actually the office with some of the most people reporting to you. Outside of like the marshalate, I think there's probably the most people that are technically reporting to me, because I've got like 40 deputies with all the local groups and then all the little like kingdom groups. Now, the truth of it is most of them don't need things most of the time. Like most of these people are just keeping a website up to date, and unless it catches on fire, they're fine. You know, I have a spreadsheet with all of my deputies, and I have it set to alert me if their warrant is running out or if their membership is expiring. So I can kind of keep an eye on that and like, you know, ping them to get my information updated. If I notice something is wrong or someone complains about something, I'll talk to the appropriate person. But like for the most part, you know, the websites are pretty, once they're stable, it's just a matter of keeping information up to date, or then if something random breaks, like we had the Shiv website break because of an update in DreamHost security, and like stuff like that, you've got to kind of jump in and help out your deputies. But for the most part, they're pretty self-maintaining. Again, the second or third bullet point I have here, make sure local groups' needs are being met. Like again, making sure that that's getting done, like that they have a web minister, or if they don't have a web minister, that somebody is responsible for it. Like we've definitely had cases where the web minister was just whoever could do the job. Like they weren't officially the web minister, they were just taking the position temporarily. There's a few groups where, not local groups right now, but a few of like subgroups on the page where I'm the one that updates it. And that's fine. It's, again, it depends on your availability of people and their time commitments and what they can put into the job. And then also their specific skills. So you might have a newer web minister who's less comfortable with certain things. And you may have a web minister that's kind of learning as they go, and that's fine too. We had the gentleman that was running the youth marshalate page actually learned a ton of stuff about WordPress, like really, really fast. And so they were able to take over like really developing that, not just maintaining it, which is great. You know, training people to do things is awesome because it means that we can do more. Which again, delegate tasks that you can't do or don't have time for. That's a big part of the job, is like figuring out what needs to get done and then saying, if I can't do it, who can do it? Like, who has the abilities, who has the skill set, who has the time to do it? And, you know, putting out a call for that, or pinging people that you know that can help with that stuff. When I was redesigning the Marshallet pages, I don't know enough about the nuances of chivalric combat to write something for chivalric combat's page that isn't going to read like BS. So I reached out to people that knew about it to have them write content for me. Like, that's one of the first things I say when people ask me about creating a new subpage, is like, that's fine, but you're going to have to give me content, because I don't know enough about so many things in the SCA. Like, there's so much that we do where I don't want to do something that's going to be half-assed. I want it to be good for people. So you reach out for people that can do stuff, even if it's not technology related, you know, just to give you filler content, and then you can format it and put it in. So something that kind of ties into all of this is the Webminister has very broad discretion in creating and dissolving kingdom level deputy positions. Like, in like official corpora and like official rules, there really aren't a lot of specifics. Like, the individual groups all have a Webminister, that's an official position, and there's a kingdom Webminister, but like, I don't have any, it's not like the Marshallet where you have like, oh, we've got the armored person and the rapier person and the target and the combat archery and all that. It's basically me, and then whoever I decide is going to be helping me. So if you need somebody to manage a page, you can just kind of say, hey, you're the person now. And I usually do it where they have a 2-year warrant, but technically they're not like officially by kingdom law warranted. They're on my roster sheet as a warranted deputy, but you have a lot of discretion as far as like creating positions where, you know, if you need help with something, you can create that position. Like, we have a Marshallet deputy that's Dunmartin's thing, where he helps with all the Marshallet database stuff. That's not specified in kingdom law. It's there because we needed it. So this is the unlimited power part of the job. Power is not actually unlimited. It's useful. I mean, it means you have to think a lot about, like, you don't have a structure that says like, okay, these positions have to be filled, which is kind of it goes both ways. It gives you a lot of ability to do things, but it also means you have to really think about what you're going to need, and then get people who can commit to doing it. So like, that's a tricky balance to do. And I try to keep track of everyone that's quote unquote working for me, and like who they are, what their contact information is, when they started doing it, when the 2 years would be up. And a lot of it is stuff that doesn't need to be done all the time. I mean, you know, the Pelican page is not being updated every day. But it's still stuff you have to consider and sort of be aware of, especially if something breaks. And then we have all of the other stuff. So when I took the job, I figured it was pretty straightforward, and I kind of figured it included the main 3 categories that I just talked about. But there are other things that I've had either I just didn't think about or have come up more lately. One of the main ones is to help moderate the kingdom level social media, specifically the Facebook page. So if you're the Webminister, you are one of the admins for the Facebook page, which means that you're on call if somebody decides to do something weird on the Facebook page. And that's more of a thing now than it was when I started, because we're on social media a lot more. So yeah, that's something to be aware of. Now, you've got a lot of backup. You've got the Kingdom Seneschal and the social media deputy, both of whom are excellent, and have done a really good job. Like one thing we've done really well since I took the office is we've got a team for the social media, where we've done a very good job of coordinating and passing information, so that regardless of who happens to be awake when something happens, it gets taken care of in a prompt manner and in a way that we're all comfortable is appropriate. So there are guidelines from the kingdom and from society as far as social media. And as a Webminister, you should be broadly aware of those because you're responsible for helping to enforce them and ensure that they're done in a fair manner. The other thing that was not a thing when I started is to run virtual kingdom events. Because that wasn't a thing when I started as Webminister. It's been an interesting learning experience. So we're doing virtual events. I sincerely hope that that's not still a thing that we have to do every event when I'm no longer Webminister. However, there's the possibility that some events may be virtual in the future, or that people may want to create virtual events to kind of fill in the gaps between in-person events. So it's definitely technology that we can potentially use. So being aware of like how to do that and how to do sort of backstage, like how to run a virtual court, because you're kind of the person that's sitting there and like making sure that the right people are focused on the video and all that. It's not particularly complicated, but it is something of a learning experience. And I will skip down a bullet point to tie this in, debugging Zoom issues. So this is something where if there's something wrong with Zoom, if someone has a question about Zoom, or if something weird happens with Zoom, you know, to be the person to kind of run point on that and figure out what went wrong and how to fix it and all that good stuff. Again, broadly because it's a technology issue, and, you know, be familiar with the technology platforms that the kingdom has available. Which brings me back to the third point, which is to provide feedback to other kingdoms about website questions or technology questions. I've gotten questions from a few different kingdoms about the Marshallet database, about the kingdom website, about our content management platform, and I believe about Zoom, or about virtual events generally. So I like to think that we have a pretty good website and we have a pretty good technological presence. Like, there's probably other kingdoms that do some stuff better, but generally speaking, I think we've done a pretty good job at creating a fairly coherent web experience and a pretty decent web page. And our Marshallet database is fairly good too. So other kingdoms notice that, and they've asked about, like, how do you do things? Or one of the big questions was asking about using what content management system to use, which is what WordPress is for us. So, you know, you have other sites that are where we were in the pre-WordPress era, where they've got a bunch of FTP'd HTML pages that are all linked together, and that's not the most easy way to maintain a website. So, you know, just be there as a resource and, you know, answer as much as you can. And if you don't know the answer to something, then be honest about it and say, yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but here's the people I can put you in touch with who might know more. So that's kind of, I have provide guidance and training to others on technology and website questions, kind of similar. You know, you're the technology person. Make yourself familiar with our technology and platforms, and then, you know, learn enough to be able to talk semi-coherently about those things to other people. You know, that's part of your job. Your part is partly kind of like a teacher, a mentor, a resource for people, especially your local web ministers. You know, try to be an open channel of communication. Just there is available, and try to make yourself available sufficiently that they can, you know, get a response. There's probably other things I've forgotten. It's a very broad job. There's a lot of different areas to it. It's hard to pin it down as one thing. I mean, technology and website broadly, but there's a lot of like little bits and pieces to it, or stuff that you just don't think about. Like all the Wikipedia stuff. When I started, I wasn't even thinking about the Wikipedia. It's like, oh yeah, that is hosted on our server. Like that is something that I'm responsible for. So I have be flexible and adaptable above all else. I think that's, I think a lot of jobs in the SCA are like that. Like you have to be willing to kind of roll with things, especially at the kingdom level. You know, there's society Webminister as your kind of overall like boss, quote unquote. But society is pretty like hands off. They don't They don't come in and tell the kingdoms how to do their website. Like they're there basically. I send them quarterly reports to kind of let them know what's happening. And there's some general guidelines there's a Webminister's handbook that's available, which has general, like, you have to do it this way kind of things. And a lot of those have to do with like security and personal information and stuff. And then there's some general guidelines about like, you should probably do these things. But a lot of the specifics are they're very open-ended. And, you know, like with a lot of things, that can be good or bad. So I think it's a job where you have to be willing to be flexible, you have to adapt to changes, and you have to be willing to, be willing to admit when you're wrong or when you mess something up and go in and fix it. Like it's not a personal thing. It's not like a indictment on you as a person. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that needs to work correctly. And, if it gets messed up, just fix it and move on. So yeah, I've learned a lot doing this job, and I know there's a lot of other stuff for me to learn. Like when I leave this position, I will not know everything, but I know more than when I started. And I'd like to think that I know enough to keep things not broken, which is kind of the main goal. And that's pretty much all of what I had for my actual like spiel here. If anyone's got any questions, either in the Facebook chat or the people that are joining me on this call, please feel free to ask me whatever, and I will answer it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. There we go. So yeah, do my co-participants have any questions?
I don't have any, no.
Cool.
Great presentation though. I appreciate it.
Great presentation. I guess my question is, if I want to be a Webminister,
yeah,
how do I acquire the knowledge that I need?
Are you looking?
I know there's no course. I know I'd
Right.
have to do a lot of self-study, but is there a guide saying, okay, this is what sites we generally use? This, I deal in databases at work all the time,
Right.
but web hosting is something completely different.
Right. So are you talking about being the Webminister at a kingdom level or a Webminister at a group level?
Well, I would think first at a group level, but maybe eventually at a kingdom level. I know there's different levels of knowledge needed.
Right.
But as I said, I deal with SQL and databases and database management all day long. That's all I do.
Yep.
But
yep.
As far as any web-based knowledge, I have very little.
So the core technology to be familiar with if you're interested in being a group Webminister would be to understand the basics of WordPress, and then just kind of like general website design. Like WordPress is very user friendly. Like it's very like what you see is what you get. There's a lot of little like back end things, but a lot of that stuff if you're familiar with doing database design, it's not hard for you to pick it up. Like okay. I had only used WordPress at a very basic level when I started this job, but you learn fast. I mean, you know how that is working in technology. But as far as like people that are interested in doing this, who don't have any experience with WordPress, I would suggest learning the basics of that, especially like how the content management works and like how to like publish posts, create new pages, design menus, work with the templates. Yeah,
like creating my own page.
Yeah, exactly.
Learn by doing. Yes.
Yeah. That's my general advice for it.
Yeah.
And then when you move to like the kingdom level, stuff that's good to be familiar with is like how to use SFTP, how to deal with like hosting and domains, just very basically like the difference between a redirect domain and a hosted domain. Stuff like that. Again, it's not like you're designing this from the ground up, but being aware of how those things work into each other. Because you're at the kingdom level, you're dealing with like the actual hosting and like the redirects and all that stuff.
So
and then, sorry, no.
No, go ahead. So would you recommend, I was thinking about, go getting, web design for dummies as a starting and then using WordPress as you suggested.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Like it's
Okay.
general web design is going to tell you about like the actual like design elements, like how to make things navigable and look good, which is definitely a part of the job.
Right.
Probably more so for the local web ministers because y'all are going to be doing more as far as like designing the actual web pages. Like for the kingdom level, I developed a template for all the kingdom groups. And that's very much like I stick very strongly to that template. So I did all the design work once and I'm going to reuse the heck out of it. Yeah.
Love templates. Templates are wonderful.
Absolutely. Especially when you're trying to keep branding consistent across the website.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess the other thing that's good to be aware of for kingdom level is just being aware of kind of like general like security stuff. And then like how WordPress implements that. Like how the users are different and how the users behave differently at like the subdomain level versus the top level. And a lot of that's just like general sort of knowledge on security practices, which again, if you're doing database stuff, then you're familiar with a lot of that. Like it's not different. It's the same basic concepts. It's just how WordPress implements them. But yeah, like first step, I would say basic web design, and then like basic, for higher level positions, it would be basic like knowledge of how web security works and general like best practices as far as that stuff goes.
So, okay, so that answers some of my questions. Here's some more. So,
sure.
I deal with work with Zoom meetings and Skype and several other different web meetings. I've used GoTo,
right?
There's I think it's like WebEx, and because since I deal in a company that deals with other companies, we always have to be able to use whatever format they have if they don't have ours. Which,
right.
So, but I've never hosted anything virtually. So if I wanted to help my local group do that, or if I wanted to set up a virtual meeting for me and my friends in the STA, for whatever reason, is there a source that you would recommend that where we could find this out? I mean, yeah, we could do Zoom meeting, and as I have experienced, unfortunately, there are some security issues which can't be taken care of when you set up the meeting. But I'm still.
So there's actually there's a few ways you could do that. Now, I'm less familiar with teleconferencing, like Zoom type teleconferencing. We use Zoom for Kingdom. That's what I've become familiar with. I've used GoToMeeting a little bit, but I'm again not super familiar with it. Depending on what you're looking to do, you might be able to use streaming through YouTube or Twitch. Like if you're not looking for something that's concurrent, where everyone has to be on video, if you're looking for one thing where sort of like one person's talking and then other people can type to feedback, like I do streaming on Twitch, which is, as far as streaming services go, that one's a little better than YouTube because YouTube has a very long chat delay. The other option you could do is if you're looking at primarily audio, but it can work with video as well, is to use Discord, which is something that we've been doing more and more for local groups. There's an unofficial Kingdom Discord. There is not an official one. But that's another option where you can set up a Discord server. It is possible to do video chat. I know they've been like removing some of the limitations on non-paid video chat and stuff. Like they keep changing it around. I'm not sure where it's at right now, but it is a possible option to use for video, and it works fairly well for audio as well. So like Bringalod does virtual Populous in the Park and virtual business meetings using I believe the business meetings using Discord. Definitely the Populous in the Park, they use Discord for that. So that's definitely an option, and that's good because it has the real-time audio and maybe video, and it also has the ability to type and chat with each other in text as well. And it's, as far as I've seen, I haven't seen the same kind of security issues that I've seen with Zoom on it. I mean, then again, Zoom is a very widely used platform, so it is definitely a target for malicious parties, unfortunately. Like any big platform is going to end up like that. And then there's also like streaming live through Facebook. If you're looking, again, if you're looking to just have one person talking to people like we're doing now, streaming through Facebook is another option, which a lot of people use the platform. But as far as like peer-to-peer, the ones I'm most familiar with are Zoom, which has some issues, and then Discord is the other one.
Well, I'm familiar with Discord. I'm
Okay.
a side thing. I'm sure this doesn't surprise you. I'm a heavy gamer electronically, so
There you go.
so I use Discord all the time.
Oh
And
yeah, I do too. I've got it open all the time.
and I have it on my phone. I have it on my
Mhm.
not my work computer, of course, but my
Yeah.
home computer. And
Right.
you know, the speed and the ability for that app is wonderful. But not
Mhm.
everybody has that, and not
That
everybody
is
can
true.
download that. And
Yep.
you know, when you're trying to set up meetings, you want something that is, you know, tech dumb for everybody.
Yeah,
You want to
absolutely.
make it as easy as possible. You know,
Yep.
that's the reason everybody wants to use Zoom is because you click the
It's
link that's sent by somebody else and you're in.
Yep, exactly. And I'm not very familiar with a lot of the other options other than GoToMeeting, which I believe is a paid product now.
It is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So unfortunately, I don't have any other real recommendations because I haven't done a lot of that research. But like, we don't have any specific guidelines about like whatever a local group wants to use for their meetings, they can use.
Right.
You know, we try to provide general guidance as far as like security, but as far as the individual platform goes, that's pretty much up to the local group.
Yeah, and I have Zoom
I used
through work.
WebEx
Oh yeah, you use WebEx.
and
Okay.
WebEx, GoToMeeting. I've used a couple of other ones, and it was actually there was a lot more lag on the audio and on the video, and just not as user friendly. So to me, even though I know Zoom has issues, it's the easiest one and the most reliable one. Like I've had to log off of WebEx and log back on for people to hear me.
I will say that Zoom has been very responsive to security issues. Like I know they've had some issues, but again, they're a very widely used platform, so they're definitely being, you know, they're the main target as far as malicious people go. But from my experience, Zoom they've been responsive as a company as far as patching security issues, and also their tech team is pretty responsive about like, oh, I had this specific problem, and looking into it. So you know, that's definitely a good thing. Again, not perfect, but unfortunately, I think especially with everyone trapped inside right now and using this kind of stuff all the time, there are going to be some potential issues, which, you know, I hate saying this, but to a certain extent, it's kind of just something you have to live with at a certain point, because nothing is going to be perfect.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if you know about this, but if you have Microsoft Edge, you cannot use the Zoom meeting at all.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's because they installed the default mode when in one of the latest updates, and in order to get out of that mode, you have to go to a website and switch out to what's called safe mode, so it allows Zoom.
Oh, okay. I wasn't familiar with that because I mostly use the Zoom app specifically.
Yeah. So
but I didn't know.
I just wanted to share that. So
okay.
So I have Microsoft Edge on my computer, and because it's new, and I usually go ahead and allow updates. I'm not, you know, usually they're there for a reason. So for security. So, but yeah, I can't run Zoom meeting. I can run Zoom rooms and other things, but
right.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
So that's the reason I use my work computer for Zoom meetings, because
that's fair.
So.
Okay, cool. But yeah, and again, brings up a good point, which is that there's a lot of like moving targets as far as technology goes. So
Yep.
There's never like, there's very rarely something where it's like, yeah, this is how we've always done it when it comes to tech. It's like, well, it might change. They might update something and it's just gonna break something else. As we were just discussing before this went live, it's the Zoom made some updates and now it doesn't stream to YouTube anymore. So hope you weren't relying on that. Oh, that's another little fun tidbit. The Kingdom Webminister is also partially responsible for maintaining the Kingdom YouTube page that we now have.
Oh, okay.
Which mainly consists of uploading virtual court videos. But yes, it's part of the job, the ever expanding job. But yeah, that's a good point. It's always a moving target, and unfortunately, there's never a platform that's like perfect. There's always going to be something that doesn't work quite the way you want it to. And so a lot of it is balancing out like good and bad and figuring out what's the best one you can get.
Just like database management, there's no perfect one.
Yep.
And as soon as you design one, it doesn't work as well as you would like it to.
Yep. It's a lot of rolling with the punches and getting the least bad solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, that you've answered all mine.
Sweet. I don't see any in chat. We're dwindling viewers now, but thank you for everyone we're almost out of time too. So I figure we'll wrap things up, but I appreciate everyone that was watching this. I'll probably put the video up on the Kingdom YouTube channel for people that are interested. And
awesome.
Thank you both for participating directly. And I'm glad I was able to help answer some questions and hopefully people understand the position a little bit better. So,
I
yeah.
hope so too.
I think the questions and the answers that you provided together are going to help a lot of different people who have questions about this job.
Awesome. Yeah. It's an interesting job. It's been a challenge, but I've learned a lot of stuff and I really enjoy it. So yeah, I definitely encourage people that are technology oriented or web design oriented. Volunteer for your local group. We're always looking for web ministers. There's a lot of local groups. There's at least a couple that I think are maintained by my office still. So apply. I'm gonna stop Facebook streaming.